Welcome to the Luke Macias Show. We are going to start next week a special session which gives Republicans a great opportunity to advance more conservative policy and accomplish a number of key Texas GOP legislative priorities. And today we are also going to break down big picture what we just learned from the campaign finance reports that have come in so far. For those of you who are not super familiar with our campaign finance schedule, I'll explain why that matters and what our big picture takeaways are on this episode. Let's get to the show. I have to let you in on just a little secret. For those of you who watch the show, most of you listen to the show, but if you watch the show, you should know something. This isn't real. I'm actually not in my studio in San Antonio because I'm traveling across the state, and my team said they thought they could make something look like my studio, and I think it looks like my studio. And I don't think everybody would want me to just talk about that because sometimes you just say, like, let the viewer have their imagination run wild, but I got to tell you. Now, the good news is I'm real. I'm not AI generated. I'm really coming to you. These are my actual opinions. What I want to do today is to break down for you what's going on next week, starting with the special session, how that works, and then also start talking about the campaign finance report. So first on the special session, Governor Abbott did something that Republicans should be very grateful for. He brought them back to do a special session, which will encompass a lot of conservative policy that is on our ugly list, the good, the bad, and the ugly series we did. In the ugly series, we listed some very basic, awesome wins that were left on the table and were missed by Republicans, mostly in the Texas House. In fact, I think almost all in the Texas House. And so Governor Abbott brought them back and listed a number of issues that he wants them to address, and I'm going to tell you about some of them. So, of course, there is going to be a conversation about flood warning systems, flood emergency communication, and relief funding for hill country floods. This all makes sense with this disastrous flood that we just went through, that there is going to be some evaluation of infrastructure that, if it had been in place, would have saved hundreds of lives, and a evaluation of starting to invest into that infrastructure. So if there is flooding in these main watershed areas in the future, it will be handled. There's also going to be a conversation about eliminating the STAR test. There has to be some form of accountability in our school system so we actually know which schools are doing well and which schools are failing. But there's going to be a conversation about eliminating the STAR test, since it is something that a lot of people do not support. Cut property taxes is on the call, which is great because you have a bunch of politicians running around saying, we eliminated $52 billion. We gave you record high. $52 billion of property tax, or $51 billion. It's either 51 or 52, but whatever the number is they give, it's big enough to where your bill should go way down, and it's not. In fact, some of your bills have gone up in the last year, and they will go up next year. So what gives? Cut property taxes is what Governor Abbott says, which means they haven't been cut far enough. It says he wants to look at, during the special session, legislation to reducing the property tax burden on Texans. So it's not coming down enough, and legislation imposing spending limits on entities authorized to impose property taxes. We have this real problem that even when the state does give significant or recognizable amounts of relief, the local governments are basically allowed to swallow up all of the reduction because the state's reduction comes in the form of your school property tax, which is the largest line item on your property tax bill. But they lower that $300 or $400. And then your school itself, local property tax goes up just a teeny bit. And then your city and your county and your MUD and your PUD and your PID and your hospital district all go up, your library district, and all of a sudden all of that's eaten up. So your bill goes up again. So he wants to impose real spending limits on entities that are authorized to impose property taxes. If we as a state give you the ability to impose a property tax, you don't have that as an inherent right. We've gifted it to you. And you know what? You've abused it, so you're coming down, and we're going to micromanage how much you can increase your tax rate. And then we're also going to provide, hopefully, additional relief. And I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out. If you do not subscribe to Texans for Fiscal Responsibility, you should, because they will be keeping people up to date as to all of the different property tax related policy that's going on. Protecting children from THC. He vetoed Lieutenant Governor Patrick's complete ban on the entire THC industry, but he does want to make sure that we actually regulate hemp-derived products in a significant way and protect children from THC. Protect unborn children is on the call. legislation further protecting unborn children and their mothers from the harm of abortion. The way the call works is the governor says this is on the call, and then the bills that can move forward have to be pertaining to the call. So this is his official declaration. He says protecting unborn children. This is part of what's going to happen during the special session. And then the description is legislation further protecting unborn children and their mothers from the harm of abortion. That's fantastic. That's awesome. A great opportunity. Texas Right to Life has pushed a piece of legislation that will significantly reduce the number of abortion pills coming into Texas, if not eliminate the abortion pills coming into Texas, killing tens of thousands of children every single year. And that bill should pertain to this call. Banning taxpayer-funded lobbying. This is probably the biggest miss from Texas GOP legislative priorities. So if this gets done this session, the Texas GOP will be applauding the actions of the legislature. I will be applauding the actions of the legislature. Taxpayers across the state, hundreds of millions of dollars is spent paying lobbyists to then lobby against your interests. So they take your money by raising your property taxes, and then they give it to a lobbyist who then works against your interests and make sure that all the inefficiencies in government remain. So we're going to ban taxpayer-funded lobbying legislation. This is the description. Legislation prohibiting taxpayer-funded lobbying, including the use of tax dollars to hire lobbyists and payment of tax dollars to associations that lobby the legislature, like the Texas Association of School Boards, which is a Marxist entity. All of the school districts join TASB, and then TASB lobbies for a bunch of crazy leftist ideas. We want to cut that out entirely. Protect human trafficking victims. This is a Democrat bill that the governor vetoed that he wants to re-examine and maybe change some. A police personnel records bill that he's pushing. Protecting women's spaces. Legislation protecting women's privacy in sex-segregated spaces. This is commonly known as the Women's Privacy Act. This is probably the biggest obvious miss on the transgender issue that Ken King killed. A number of these bills, the abortion bill, the taxpayer-funded lobbying bill, and the Women's Privacy Act, were all killed by one individual in the Texas House, and that's Chairman Ken King. He is now put in a situation where the spotlight is shined on him. During the session, he can use this excuse. Well, I got like 1,000 bills, and I'm trying to move a bunch of stuff, and we can't get to everything. Well, now he has 30 days. The special session is going to be 30 days. There's only going to be like 2 State Affairs Committee hearings probably during this time. So you can't not hear one of the 4 or 5 bills sent to you, and then you can't not take action on it. It's much harder to kill things during a special session, which again is why we're all very grateful for the governor putting these policies on the special session call. Attorney General election powers, legislation proposing a constitutional amendment allowing the Attorney General to prosecute state election crimes. There is a bill that's not a constitutional amendment that wouldn't need 2/3 and Democrat votes that I think would also be great, and I hope the governor adds that to the call because that's something we could get done. I don't think that bill will pass because the Democrats will not let that constitutional amendment pass, in my opinion. Redistricting. This is going to be a contentious issue. Democrats are talking about breaking quorum, which we will talk more about in future episodes. But this is going to be an opportunity. The Department of Justice has come in and said there are a number of districts that have real problems here. So Texas is going to take a look at that. In the process of changing those maps, it is likely that we will end up with 2, 3, 4, or 5 more Republican congressional districts, which would be great because if we want to maintain the majority nationwide and be able to continue to advance the Trump agenda, we are going to have more Republicans. Because if we lose a couple seats in other blue states and don't make up for that loss with states like Texas, we will lose the majority. And if Democrats take Congress in this midterm cycle, it will halt so many positive things that we could see implemented. So it's something we cannot let happen. Let's shift to Texas Ethics Commission reports. So how does this work? There are 2 main reports filed in the odd years. Even years are different, but in odd years, there's a July 15th report that's filed, and then there's a January 15th of next year that will cover everything raised from July 1st to December 31st. Those are the 2 main campaign finance reports. The unique thing about the July 15th report is that it covers a very short period of time because state lawmakers and candidates, if they're not a state lawmaker, are not prohibited from raising money, but those who are state lawmakers cannot raise money until 30 days past the session ending. So they basically are given this 8 or 9 day window. I can't remember exactly how long the window was this year, but it's anywhere from 10 to 11 to 8 to 9 days where they're allowed to raise money. It's a very short period of time. So they govern and they have this really short period of time to raise a bunch of money to show on July 15th that they are in a good position to get reelected. Or if you're a candidate running for statewide office, to show that you have real statewide support for the office that you are seeking, right? For the open seats, which we're going to break down here for you in a minute, you'll see what we can kind of gain as insights. Now, there's several things. One is just the sheer amount of money, the number of donors you have, and then who's giving you money. Because if you're somebody who follows Texas politics, you know that the type of people that are giving you money tells us a lot about you. And it also tells us about your ability to raise more money in the future. We know what it takes to get into statewide office. So the question is, who's in a good position as the dust has settled and we have all these reports coming in? Before I go to the statewide situation, I'll talk about the state house and the state senate. There's not a tremendous amount, in my opinion, of insight that came as a result of the state house finance reports that came out. In fact, a lot of them were not incredibly noticeable. They weren't remarkable. There's not a lot to comment on. I will say this big picture. Legislators, state representatives who went out there and raised money, chairman tended to raise pretty big money. A lot of the lobby didn't get super engaged. Some of the larger donors didn't write major checks. The conservative wing of the Republican Party raised strong amounts of money, so they showed themselves to be in very good contention for maintaining the conservative coalition in the Texas House of Representatives. There are some moderate forces like Sands Casino and Texans for Lawsuit Reform who are trying to organize people potentially against these more conservative lawmakers. And they showed the state, for any insiders that are watching, that they can raise money from a broad coalition of individuals who are going to be supportive of their reelection. So that positions them well as they are preparing for their reelection. Speaker Burrows raised a decent amount of money, but it wasn't a massive amount of money, is what I would say. Dennis Bonnen, Dade Phelan in the past had raised, now they had longer periods of time to raise that money, but like when Dennis Bonnen got elected speaker, it was $4 or $5 million. I think Speaker Burrows will eventually raise that $4 to $5 million that a speaker would raise if he goes out there and works it, but he had an 8-day period of time. And he's a little under $2 million cash on hand. He's relatively well positioned. The conservative side's relatively well positioned. The moderates are well positioned financially. There's nothing super surprising. There is I wouldn't say there's nothing. I'll give you one example of something that's a little more surprising.
Hey folks, Chris Salcedo here. I've got something special for you, the Salcedo Storm podcast. As your friendly, liberty-loving Latino, I bring you a mix of engaging discussions to help us fight for our state and our conservative values. It's the perfect way to stay informed and engaged in what's happening around you. So, what are you waiting for? Don't miss out on the storm of information and entertainment coming your way. The Salcedo Storm podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Representative Mark LaHood is a freshman Republican state representative, and he gained notoriety this session because he ended up not being 100% on board with Texans for Lawsuit Reform, and they became very contentious against him during the session. He ended up not supporting a number of key policies. Their largest bill of the session, he actually voted out of committee, heard it and voted it out of committee, but still did not fully support the policy when it came to the floor, and actually worked with Mitch Little and Brent Money and other conservative Republicans to amend that bill to make it better in their opinion. And Texans for Lawsuit Reform have been actively going into San Antonio. This is my city. I live there. I know a lot about what's going on there. And Texans for Lawsuit Reform is actively in San Antonio trying to find a more moderate, Chamber of Commerce, middle-of-the-road type Republican. Now, Mark LaHood defeated Steve Allison. Steve Allison was one of the 10 most liberal Republicans in the Texas House of Representatives. He replaced Joe Strauss, who was probably the most liberal Republican in the Texas House of Representatives. That district has a lot of moderates because it has Alamo Heights and Terrell Hills. And if you're not from San Antonio, what you need to know about those cities is that's where your wealthier old money lives. And so that district has that. It's about 25 to 30% of the voting block of the district. And they want someone who's a more moderate, middle-of-the-road, business, corporate type Republican. And so they are actively in his district trying to recruit against him. Regardless of what happens this election cycle, Mark LaHood will likely be in a very contentious race. He has one of the 5 highest cash on hand numbers right now with $1,290,000. That's a tremendous fundraising haul. And it is given by a lot of people who do not support Texans for Lawsuit Reform, just snapping their fingers and getting whatever bill they want out of the legislative process. That's ultimately the group of people that are supporting Mark LaHood. And so what this says is that if Texans for Lawsuit Reform decide to, in this cycle, try to restore the Texas House to a chamber that just does whatever they want without any questions asked, then that's going to be a big uphill battle for them. There's a lot going on in Texans for Lawsuit Reform. I have not commented on that yet, just because the dust has not settled and there's a lot of unknowns. But Texans for Lawsuit Reform is going through a pretty significant upheaval as an entity and organization. But they do have $37 million in the bank. So they could spend, and I know for a matter of fact that they have offered to spend up to $3 million to defeat Mark LaHood. That might be a record for the amount of money spent in a Texas House race in Texas history. So they are trying actively. This will be a very contentious seat if TLR has their way. And Mark LaHood, as a freshman, having $1.3 million in the bank was definitely something that caught a lot of people's attention. In the Texas Senate, you don't have substantial races. You're not likely to have any of these sitting state senators that have serious primary challengers, in my opinion. You could see some. Sands casinos ultimately might decide to spend several $1 million to try to take out several different senators or play in some of the open seats that are shaping up. But right now, we have not seen that take place. So currently, it's just in a different the people evaluating campaign finance reports in the state Senate really aren't looking into anything that is incredibly insightful, one way or the other. But the Senate reports came out and there was nothing crazy about them. Ultimately, we move into statewide, which is where most of the attention is going right now. And the main focus for people is on a number of these contentious statewide seats. Now, we have 2 races we'll break down. One is the race for comptroller, and the next is the race for attorney general. Now, when it comes to the race for comptroller, Don Huffines is assumed to be in the best cash position. He's known to be in the best cash position at this point. He already put a statement saying that his campaign has over $15 million in the bank. And so everyone knows that he's going to be the cash leader now that the other candidates have also reported what they have. I'm actually pulling up to see, and Don Huffines' report as of right now has not been posted, so there's not a lot I can tell you about that. But what we know is that Don has over $15 million in the bank, which makes him heavily the favored person from a cash position. He's also run statewide before, just like Christy Craddock, his other opponent, Kelly Hancock, has not. And so they're both in that position. Now, Kelly Hancock is sitting on $5.974 million. So almost $6 million is what Kelly Hancock is sitting on in his race. And what that means is that he was able to raise a little under $2 million. I will say, for what it's worth, this money largely came from what I would constitute as the Austin Swamp, to be completely honest. It was... If you were to ask me, hey, Luke, what is a name of just some of the most moderate Republican donors out there, I would tell you it makes up Kelly Hancock's statewide fundraising report so far. Now, you don't know a lot of these names. The owner of Buc-ee's gave him money. John Corona, who was one of the most liberal state senators in Texas. By the way, the owner of Buc-ee's, I have never met the guy. I don't know of him to be a bad person. And he gives to a lot of different Republicans. I mean, he should know I spend a lot of money at Buc-ee's. So thank you, Mr. Alpin. John Corona, $100,000. Not surprising. He doesn't like Don Huffines. Don Huffines defeated him in a Republican primary, but John Corona has been, if he was in the state Senate right now, he'd be the most liberal state senator. He's a very liberal Republican. Gary Blake, Al Banker, Bruce Bugg, Harlan Crow, Dee Kelly out of Fort Worth, John Now, whose former wife was like a fundraiser for Planned Parenthood. So you have Harlan Crow, very moderate to liberal Republican donor. Dee Kelly, probably the most moderate donor in Fort Worth. John Now, probably the most moderate Republican donor in Houston. Ross Perot, very middle of the road. Karl Rove gave to Kelly Hancock. His wife, Karen Rove, gave to Kelly Hancock. Bob Rowling, Kelsey Warren, and probably more PACs than any other statewide open seat contender. So Kelly Hancock was clearly the choice of some of your most moderate donors. Within the moderate establishment wing, we have what I define as like moderate establishment and conservative establishment. And so they could still be kind of more of your Chamber of Commerce type donors, more your middle of the road, less contentious, not as engaged on the cultural issue donors. But even in that coalition, there are people who are more conservative and people who are less conservative. And I will tell you, if you look at Kelly Hancock's finance report, his report is largely made up of people in the less conservative wing. After Kelly comes Christy Craddick. Now, Christy Craddick outraised Kelly Hancock, which is a very impressive accomplishment by Christy Craddick, because Kelly received kind of a little bit of the incumbency status leading up to this very short window. And Christy also could not raise money except for this window because she is a state elected official. She has two things going for her. For those of you who just kind of want the insider perspective, Christy Craddick is going to remain on the Railroad Commission whether she wins the comptroller position or not. So I want you to think about this. If you are an oil and gas company who is heavily regulated by the decisions that the Railroad Commissioner makes, your ability to financially continue to succeed in this environment, in this regulated environment in Texas, largely depends upon Christy Craddick's decisions. So you probably want to give her money whether she's going to be the next comptroller or not. So there's a ton of oil and gas companies on Christy Craddick's report. That's just the reality. Also, her dad is the chairman of transportation. And you know what? Not surprising, there's a couple people that make most of their money in the transportation industry who donated a lot of money to her campaign. Because ultimately, donors, and just for those of you who are wondering how this works, in my opinion, from my experience, from my vantage point, the vast majority of the time, this is not where an elected official is calling a donor and saying, if you do not do this financial thing campaign-wise that I want you to do, then I will hurt you in this way. That's not I'm not saying that has never happened. I'm sure that does happen. But the vast majority of times, that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is very wealthy people who are very successful because of the decisions of certain decision makers that are in power in Texas politics. And they generally they know how to take certain actions that will make sure that they are seen by the people that are going to determine a lot of their future as positive. And so if you are a road construction person, you just know if I give Christy Craddick money, her dad, Tom Craddick, is going to watch her finance report like a hawk. So it's in my best interest to do this. And maybe I'll just get a text from Tom Craddick saying, hey, thanks a lot. Saw you donated to my daughter. So Christy Craddick did outraise Kelly Hancock but is sitting at less money because she had less money going in. I will also say this about Christy's campaign, for those of you who kind of want to see how insiders look at these campaign reports. She has over $3 million cash on hand, but she spent $1.2 million in the last 6 months. No other candidate running for these statewide positions spent close to $1.2 million. Joan Huffman didn't spend that money. Aaron Wrights didn't spend that money. Mays Middleton didn't spend that money. Kelly Hancock, I haven't seen Don Huffines, but I don't think Don Huffines spent that money. Nobody came close to spending $1.2 million in the last 6 months. I don't know why she did. I can just say from a campaign operative perspective, if I had been in a room, part of a strategy with Christy Craddick, I don't know what decisions they made to spend $1.2 million. I haven't even dug into what they spent the money on, But that's a crazy amount of money. And if they had just kept their spending, they could have spent $600,000 and still been the biggest spender of anybody and been closer to $4 million cash on hand. So that ends up being a real problem when you talk about the staying power of now till March of next year. You keep that kind of money going and spending rate, you're going to run out of money. And then in January and February, when everybody's actually making their decisions, you're going to be really, really low on cash. So we'll see what Christy Craddock decides. But right now you have Don Huffines with over $15 million cash on hand, Kelly Hancock with close to $6 million, Christy Craddock at $3 million, but both Don and Christy were able to raise more money than Kelly. So that is the current lay of the land when it comes to the position of Texas Comptroller. Now let's move on to Attorney General. Now, first, you have Senator Joan Huffman. Now, Senator Joan Huffman is definitely seen as the most moderate individual running for Attorney General compared to Aaron Reitz and Mays Middleton. Nobody really debates that. Again, you had a very short period of time. So what she seemed to do was, instead of focusing on raising as much money as possible, like Christy Craddock, who had this massive list, it looks like Joan Huffman honed in on a handful of very large donors and went after and was able to secure their financial support. So John Now, I mentioned him because he was a very large donor to Kelly Hancock. He also gave very generously to Joan Huffman. Dick Weekly gave to Joan Huffman. He also gave to Mays Middleton, but he gave to Joan Huffman. And I would say most insiders believe that Dick Weekly is with Joan over Mays overall. Alan Hassenflew is a very large Houston donor that runs the Houston HRBC, which is the business coalition there in Houston. He gave her a lot of money. The Border Health PAC gave her a substantial amount of money. And that is the father-in-law, like the person who has the most influence on that, I believe, is the father-in-law of John Bash, who was running for Attorney General and then dropped out of the race. So I don't know if that is an indicator that John Bash is with Joan Huffman, but that would be very helpful to her if he and his network were with her. Kevin Eltai, former state senator, also gave to her and Mays Middleton. It seems like there's this kind of Eltai, Texans for Lawsuit Reform. Dick Weekly gave to both Middleton and Huffman, but Kevin Eltai gave to her. Donna Campbell gave to her, which is just notable because, you know, she serves with both Mays and Joan. So her picking Joan is just a notable action. The owner of Buc-ee's, again, Archie Alpin, I think they call him something. I don't know this guy. So somebody told me like his commonly referred to first name is different. I don't know this guy, but I figured y'all all know Buc-ee's, so you'd want to know. But the owner of Buc-ee's gave to Joan Huffman, and then Ross Perot out of Fort Worth. So these are all the more moderate business establishment type donors that are with her. It was, I don't remember exactly what she raised, but I want to say it's like $600,000, and then she had a little over $3 million cash on hand. Mays Middleton ended up having like $10,250,000 cash on hand, which is, of course, puts him kind of similarly in the Don Huffines position of being in the strongest cash position. But I haven't seen Don's report either. It might be a little bit more like Mays Middleton's report when it comes out, but we'll have to see. And I'll give you all a little update maybe next week if it's posted, just so y'all know what's going on. Mays Middleton only raised $160,000. So that's not a substantial amount of money for anybody thinking about a statewide race. His donors are a little bit more in what we'd consider the conservative side of the GOP. So he has Roger Ellswick, Rex Gore, Stacey Hawk, Joe Popolo, Joe Lonsdale. These are people on the more conservative side of the GOP as a whole. He also has TLR and Dick Weekly and Kevin Eltai. But overall, $160,000 is just not a lot of money. There are a lot of state representatives who are just running for re-election that raised over $160,000 in the 8 days they had. Now, Mays Middleton, unlike some of the other candidates, put $10 million of his own money into the race. Joan Huffman didn't put any of her own money in the race. Aaron Reitz didn't put any of his own money in the race. So ultimately, he's in a better position. And some candidates can say, hey, I'm going to put a lot of money up, which means, one, you have a harder time raising money. Because just imagine if you're a donor who's either going to give Mays Middleton $10,000 or $100,000. If he's putting in $10 million, you're more likely to give him a $10,000 check and save the other 90 and give 50 to your buddy who you know doesn't have his own money to put in. So that's one of the things that people like Don Huffines and Mays Middleton will always struggle with. But overall, he still has $10,250,000 in the bank. He's going to be a serious contender in the race for Attorney General. And then you have Aaron Reitz. And Aaron Reitz, I will give him some credit, was most everyone I have talked to has been impressed with how much Aaron was actually able to raise. And Aaron raised over $2 million. Again, you compare him to Joan Huffman or Mace Middleton. These are sitting state senators, and combined, they raised less than half of what Aaron raised sitting down and going 0 to 60. So people who were not taking him seriously when he got in are taking him more seriously now since he raised over $2 million. He has people like Jeff Austin, Cody Campbell, Kent Hance, Holly Frost, Bill Holmes, Gaylord Huey, Robert Marling, Don Dyer, Bubba Salisbury, Jeff Yass. This is a broad array of people in East Texas and West Texas and Dallas and Houston and Austin. And Jeff Yass, who was one of the largest donors to anybody, everyone knows he has significant capacity to give more. So Aaron Wrights definitely took himself from somebody who people were just watching to saying, okay, he's a real contender. The biggest takeaway from the campaign finance reports is this: you're going to have 3 real contenders for attorney general in this upcoming election. 3 people that will all be really part of the conversation, that all of your friends will ask, and they might at the end of that race know about all 3 of them. There's an opportunity for Texans to engage with all the attorney general candidates and talk to them about what we want from our next attorney general administration. You know that I'm a big fan of what Ken Paxton has done as attorney general. I think he's one of the greatest attorney generals in the nation. And so who replaces him is a really important conversation that we're going to have as a state. And who is staffing that administration ends up being really, really important. If Texans for Lawsuit Reform is staffing the next attorney general's office, that's not good at all. And this is the first time I'm talking about the AG race, but I just need to let y'all know, that's a big concern of a lot of people on the conservative side. TLR should not staff the next attorney general's administration. If they do, the AG's office will stop winning billion-dollar lawsuits from Google and Facebook. You think Texans for Lawsuit Reform want to actually sue tech companies? Absolutely not. I don't know that they want anybody sued ever, which is one of the reasons for this kind of rebrand. And hopefully we get some more clarity as to what the new TLR will do going forward. I'm not convinced there is a new TLR. I think the new TLR might be the same as the old TLR. So we'll have to see how all of that plays out. But those are some of the statewide reports and how people are looking at them. Comptroller, Attorney General. Again, more insights might come out, and you might learn different things about different candidates, but that's where we stand as we evaluate just the Comptroller race, the Attorney General race, and what's moving on. Now, as you can hear, these are large sums of money. Because guess what? The future of Texas is at stake. And there's some dominoes falling, which means there's opportunities. And there are a lot of people who don't want what's best for Texas that are planning on spending a substantial amount of money trying to change the direction of Texas. And they're not messing around. That's one of the things that's very clear from these reports. They are writing massive sums of money to change where Texas goes. They're trying to see if they can't stop the conservative trajectory and move everything back to the middle. That's not where we need to move as a state. Every one of you know that. And we have to make sure together that we are actually watching what's happening, that we're learning what that means about the people who want to stop Texas's rightward trajectory and what their motivations are and where they care and where they're putting money into. And then we need to act accordingly. So that's why I wanted to talk to you about the campaign finance reports. I think it is interesting. I try to always give a mixture of kind of news, policy, and then maybe some inner political type observation that the normal Texan isn't necessarily viewing. So with that, I hope that y'all have a blessed week. I'm on the road this week. I had a chance to take my family for a quasi vacation. I actually worked quite a bit while we were on the road, but we mixed it up. We got an Airbnb. We brought all of our family. We brought some friends and family over to see us while I had some time in the evenings, and then just continued to work during the day. But we're trying to find creative ways to spend time together this summer as a family and get some time away before this special session kicks off. We had to, of course, I told you all, stop our Florida vacation, but we will hopefully do that right before the kids go back to school and after our special session. Please, if you are a legislator, which I know quite a few of y'all listen to this program, if you are a legislator, please get the work done in the next 30 days because I really want to go on vacation, I'll be honest, and it would really help my family, my marriage, my wife. So come on, just help a brother out here and let's do 30 days. Get this stuff done that the governor told you to get done, and let's go home and take a little break. May God bless you, and may God bless Texas.